Okay, good morning everyone. It's Wednesday, June 9th, 2021, and we're looking at the S&P 500 futures market. We're going to jump to our ultra high time frames here and do our pre-market analysis. One quick thing before we keep going here, I do want to point out, last night I did post in the chat that there are some specific zones in the market that we're kind of chopping around in. And it just so happens that right now, this area up here where we basically played around from about 42.14 to 42.35, let's call it that, we're stuck back in that chop zone. And you can see we're building out this volume profile here. I don't typically trade with volume profile, but I just thought it would be interesting to throw it up. And it just so happens that a lot of our levels that we identify in here line up with the low volume nodes. And then all of the chop areas that we're basically trying to trade around create these high volume nodes in the volume profile. So just something that I posted last night. You can see the highlights here. They might be a little bit, it might be hard to see in the screen, but down in this region, a nice kind of area that I highlighted. Another area right in here where you can see chop all the way back through here, all the way through here, all the way through here, and then when we come down to it, we kind of bounce above it. And then when we get above that zone, we get into this new zone, and you can see all the chop back here, and then all the chop in through here. It's hard to see, but I did highlight it. And then once we bump up and get above that zone, we now are stuck in this zone about 42.14 to 42.35. And so just interesting to note that, we have these interesting levels that line up with a lot of the low volume nodes, and then all the chop creates these high volume nodes. And typically I don't even look at the profile. I'm just looking at the pure price action, and just the price action alone you can identify a lot of the low volume nodes just by looking at previous price action. So just something interesting that I posted last night that I did want to mention. But let's look at our pre-market here. In our quarterly, nothing has changed, nothing new to say there, nothing new to say on the monthly, and nothing new to say on the weekly. Still, we push to a higher high, on RVI. Everything looks fairly strong here. Decent IRB bar here, huge wick to the downside, and we're still holding above the open of that candle, previous candle, so looking fairly strong there on the weekly. No signs of exhaustion, although you could argue that right now, as we break the high of 42.38 quarter, if we can get there, we will then potentially have some type of bearish exhaustion pattern setting up. So we'll have to watch that. We'll see if we can push above the chop zone that we're in right now and get into a new all-time high territory. On the daily, remember that we talked about the bearish indication off of the June 7th candle. And then sure enough, yesterday we did have that sell-off that made sense. Remember we talked about seeing the bearish indication here on the daily yesterday. And we saw it on the 4-hour, we saw it on the hourly. We didn't see it on the intermediate time frames, and then we saw it on the short time frames. And so right when we opened, and we'll get into this on the 30-minute chart, so I might as well save it until then, but essentially right when we opened at 6:30, we did get confirmation of the bearishness on the intermediate time frames as well. And so basically a minute or two after the open, we were very strong bear bias for the day, and took a short just a few minutes after the open. And so we'll talk about that in a second. Right now, we have not broken the previous daily high at 36.75. We're very close, and so we'll have to kind of monitor this as the day goes on. So no signs of exhaustion just yet. On the 4-hour, we did have a nice bullish indication here just in the Globex session yesterday. It looks like the overnight low is right at 21.50, which is just one tick above the 50% of the previous day. and we held that and with a bullish divergence on the 4-hour. So we could potentially see some type of push off this level to break the all-time high up at 38. We'll have to watch here. So right now on the 4-hour, not necessarily any clear indications of bearishness. We do have a little bit of time for this signal to develop and close. So, hopefully by the time this closes at 7, we're breaking above 54 on RVI, or else we will start to get somewhat of a bearish exhaustion indication here. So we'll have to kind of watch that for now. And I'm just going back to the daily just to see if we did get some type of bullish indication off the previous daily low, and we don't have it. Remember, there's not enough resolution to really see, and then when we get to the 4-hour, that's when we get that first bullish indication. So let's jump down to our shorter time frames and see if we have anything else going on there. Just looking overnight here. Definitely, I think in the same area that we saw it on the 4-hour, we're seeing a bullish indication on the hourly right over here. And then arguably it continued to develop, so we got a second divergence just a little bit after that in the overnight. So we have that there as well. And then we even have a pretty nice bullish indication off of this pullback here on the 5 a.m. candle, and got another bullish indication. So for the bullish case, looking pretty strong off the lows here. And then off the highs, as we push, let's just take a look here. It's very, very slight, but just a little bit higher there and just a little bit higher there. Now, if you extrapolate all the way back to this previous high, we do have the beginnings of what looks to be some potential divergence here. So off that high to the current high, the case could be made for some bearishness there. So I'll go ahead and mark it. That candle is officially closed, so that is an official signal right there. And so we're going to have to kind of see what the other time frames are saying. Just to kind of review the higher time frames here, no signs of exhaustion on the ultra high time frames. On the daily, not necessarily any signs of exhaustion just yet. And the bearish indication that we got at the beginning of yesterday has played out. We did get the pullback to 0575, and so that could be all that really gets. And right now, no signs of exhaustion there. When we go to the 4-hour, we have some decent bullish indications off the lows, with a little bit of some bearish signals here off the highs. So we're kind of almost in a situation like we were yesterday, where we have some conflicting signals here. Keep in mind that we are in, again, that chop zone, right? So we're just at the upper end of it, but remember, 42.14 to about 42.35. This area has been a major chop zone for quite a while, going all the way back to when we created the all-time high for the June contract, and now we're kind of having trouble here. So it's just kind of interesting. We came up, tried to break the all-time high, and just have been having a lot of trouble over here. So very sideways, which means we're going to have a lot of these conflicting signals. So right now, the 4-hour giving us a little bit of bullishness off lows and some bearishness off the highs. And then on the current candle, which has a little bit more time to develop, we said we have pushed up just a little bit. And the RVI has pushed down, but we have another 45 minutes. So this could eventually push up a little higher, and we no longer have that signal. So we'll have to kind of watch that. And then on the 60-minute, we have the conflicting signals as well, with some bullish indications off the lows, and this bearish indication on the most recent high, which I believe is our overnight high now. So right at 42.34 quarter. So not a beautiful view this morning, but it is what it is. The market has been quite sideways here for 2 or 3 days in a row in this range. So let's go over to our 30-minute. and just take a look at the local area here, see if we have any other indications. We did have a pretty clear bullish indication off that test yesterday off the previous daily low, and then currently in this, we're seeing basically the same thing we saw on the hourly and the 4 hour. A lot of nice bullish indications on the pullbacks here. Even this most recent pullback, which I think we also saw there on the hourly, right down here. Really nice bullish indication. And currently no signs of exhaustion on the push, at least from this 30-minute perspective. So a lot of conflicting stuff going on in here. Let's go over to our 10-minute. And on the 10-minute here, pretty much have the same indications. A lot of those areas where we got bullish indications, we're getting them as well on our 10-minute. Even arguably on this most recent pullback, another really nice bullish indication. But then when you go to the highs, you get the opposite story. So it's quite mixed this morning. And essentially, we really need to get out of this chop, right? There's just a lot of garbage up in here. Not necessarily anything that's jumping out to me right now. There's really, essentially, we need to get up here, break above 36, the previous daily high, 37 quarter or 36.75, and get above that all-time high and start testing and creating some new structure up above. Otherwise, if we do break out of the chop zone, which is basically right around 42.14 on the lower end, and we can get past the previous daily low, then that will bring us into some of the other zones, high volume zones down below. So unfortunately, not a very clear picture this morning. I definitely cannot create a clear case for what we could expect here. Obviously, it looks like they're trying to push here and test the all-time high, but every time they do it, they come up, they get the sell-off. They push up, they get the sell-off, and it's happened multiple times. So, eventually it's going to break, right? Or it's just going to sell off. An important thing to note is that when we go to the ultra-high time frames, we don't necessarily, let me just check here really quickly, we don't necessarily have any signs of exhaustion up here. So I don't expect there to be some type of more extended sell-off. Remember, when we look to our weekly a few weeks back, we got that exhaustion pattern on May 7th and the week that closed May 14th. And on both indications, we did get some pretty nice sell-offs. But right now, we don't have that. So I'm skeptical of it just being a big sell-off this morning. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but don't see the signals for it just yet. And so if we were to just go by the ultra-high time frame signals, we could expect the market to continue to push here. And then as we jump down to shorter and shorter time frames, we just start getting a lot of conflicting information. So that's just the nature of what's going on in the market right now. And we're just going to have to basically trade levels and clear signals this morning